The Heilpern Show. Sponsored by Step Finance, your go-to DeFi portfolio manager on Solana. Luno, if you're just getting into Bitcoin, it's the perfect place to start. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Heilpern Show. Today is going to be so much fun because I'm bringing a guest on who I think we agree on a lot of different issues in the world right now. And I'm pretty sure he can articulate many of these points better than I can. So I'm really excited to chat to him. But before I bring him on, as usual, this is powered by the VC firm Icon Plus Capital and is sponsored by BlockFi. I've left a link in the description and in the comments. If you want to check them out, they offer really cool interest rates, I think around 11% or something like that on your stablecoin. So it is pretty cool. All right, so let's get into this. Joining me today is the host of the Mark Moss Show on iHeart Radio. I think that kind of gives it away. It is, he's a freedom maximalist and the person who's on a big mission to wake people up.
That's
Mark,
right.
What's up?
That's right. You got that right. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to dig in.
Yeah, I want to go for this. I'm not going to do any background stuff. I want to go straight into this. But is that right in saying you're here to wake people up? Would you put it like that?
That's what I'm trying to do. You know, I think the way that I see the world is that I think we're kind of in World War III, and it's the governments versus the people. And I think really it's not a war. People are afraid of, going to nuclear war right now. I don't think that's, I think that's not very probable. I think there's a low probability that happens. I think the real war is over information and money. War, it's over information and money. And I made a comment that kind of turned into a meme, and I said, we have memes and we have Bitcoin, and they got nothing, right? So we have the tools that we need to win, but it's a war of information. And I think we see this more now than ever before. And so just like the printing press changed things in 1500s, the internet is changing things today. And so they've lost the narrative. They lost their grip. Alternative news, like what you're doing, like what I do, has taken off. Obviously, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson are smashing whatever they control. And so they've lost their grip on information, and they're trying to get back to that. We can dig into that more. But I think it's a race. And the race is, can we wake enough people up before they can reach their end goal? And that's where we're at. So I'm trying to wake as many people up as I can. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is great. There's so much to get into. Let's just go for it. Okay. So we're talking about, let's start with Bitcoin and we'll start with Canada. So I think the narrative surrounding Bitcoin is slightly changing. At the beginning of COVID, I shouldn't even say that because of buzzwords and stuff. At the beginning of, you know what?
Yeah, watch out.
Yeah, watch out. So at the beginning of COVID, we were really pushing that safe haven asset, right? Especially because we saw the markets crash. Bitcoin came fighting back. But now we're sort of seeing the whole, it's a hedge against tyranny. So the idea that it's this humanitarian money, I think we saw even with Ukraine around $4.4 million in Bitcoin being donated, people being able to use Bitcoin, despite Canada freezing their bank accounts. So how is this going to help with mass adoption? Bitcoin as this humanitarian type of money. And I guess the whole, everything that's going on in the world right now is kind of helping sell it.
Yeah, well, humans are very simple at their core, right? They were really motivated by two things. So humans want to rush towards pleasure, or they want to run from pain. And so we have, those are the two main, it's the carrot or the stick. And those are two main things that drive us as humans. And so when, the crypto markets are going parabolic, it's sucking everybody in. I want to get rich. I want to get rich. Everyone's making money but me. And it starts sucking people up. And the more people sucked in, the more it goes up, and it turns into this parabolic run. But then when the blow off top happens and it starts crashing, then people run from the pain and they want to sell, right? That's why it's very volatile at the top. But also back to the kind of point that you're making, is that we also, again, motivated by pain. So for example, I believe in going to the chiropractor. I believe in having a solid base. And if my spine's in proper position, the rest of my body works right. And I've gone for most of my life and I really believe in it, but I don't typically go anymore until I'm in pain. the pain has to motivate me. And so the reason why I say that is back to Bitcoin. So if we look at, parts of the world in Africa, Central America, where they have serious problems, they've moved on to Bitcoin first because their pain is high enough. So what we've seen in obviously Venezuela, 2,500% inflation, or Lebanon, 98% inflation, they switched out their currency. For them, the pain is so high, they're moving to Bitcoin as fast as they possibly can. In the United States, in Canada, Western Europe, they don't really have that pain. They've been mostly motivated by pleasure. I heard I can get rich if I buy Bitcoin, or now chase a cryptocurrency. I've called Bitcoin the great bait and switch. So it sucks you in to make money and then you stay for the freedom aspect. But what we're seeing now is the entire world has woken up to the actual pain. So the pain, like I said, in Argentina, Venezuela, Lebanon, they see that. But in the US and Canada, we're like, what do we need that for? Like, our money's like pretty good. Yeah, I mean, sure, it's the Fed created 35% more money. We had 35% inflation, but it's not as bad as 2,500% inflation, right?
Yeah.
So the pain wasn't high enough for most people. But all of a sudden, in the last 2 to 3 weeks in Canada, we just saw that your money isn't safe. Your money isn't your money. So the truckers, the people that donated to the truckers, got their money frozen. And then what the world just saw, there's 3 global superpowers in the world: US, China, and Russia. 3 global superpowers with nukes, Russia being one of them. And their bank accounts just got seized. And it was one thing if it was the truckers in Canada, but now a sovereign nation with nukes. And so the world just realized really fast that your money is not safe.
So the weird part of all of this is we're kind of seeing it on both sides, right? So we're seeing money being donated to the Canadians to fight the government. We're seeing money being donated to Ukrainians to fight the government. But then there's also the question, is Russia going to start adopting Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies to circumvent sanctions? I know Elizabeth Warren was saying something. I didn't even read it. I don't want to listen to her stuff, but I know she was saying, and she was saying, actually I did read it. She said something like, this is why we need more regulation on digital assets or something like that.
Yeah.
So how do we explain to people that this, as much as it's for you, it's also for your enemies, but it's still important? Like, how do we, because my concern is we're going to, if Russia do start to circumvent sanctions using crypto, they could use any, I don't really know. Maybe they'll use Bitcoin, but I worry that we could end up in kind of like in the environmental climate change issue that we saw with Bitcoin and Elon Musk, last year.
Well, a couple things I'd say. First off, I think trying to discuss it at that level is at the wrong level. And so it's really much deeper problem. So really it's the money system that got us to this point that we're at today. So now, should we ban Bitcoin because Russia wants to use it? I mean, that's the conversation at too micro a level. We kind of have to zoom out. That's one thing I'd say. The other thing that I would say about that is that to your point, someone might say they're our enemy and they're using it, so we need to ban that. But everyone's an enemy of somebody. The world's never been more divided. And so whether you're left or right or red or blue or whatever, right? Somebody's on the other side of that. And so you're always going to be someone's enemy. And so you have to think about that. I'm always going to opt for the side of freedom, as you said, freedom maximalist. And so a couple of things I would say. One is that sanctions, right? That's the tool. The US dollar has been weaponized. It wasn't just Elizabeth Warren. As a matter of fact, Brad Sherman from California has been on the news for a couple of years now saying that cryptocurrencies undermines the US dollar, and it undermines the US's ability to put sanctions on nations like Iran. He actually said that.
Yeah.
And so if I'm Iran listening to that, I'm like, so it takes away their ability to sanction us. Maybe we should use that.
Yeah.
And so freedom is messy. For you to have the freedom to say what you want to say, you might say things I don't like sometimes, but that's just the way it works. And so the freedom to transact, I understand what you're saying. I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I answered that.
No, it's fine. I think we are going to get into a little bit of a war over it. I really do. I think it's going to be the same kind of freedom of speech war, because you and I both understand that freedom is messy. And in order for freedom to prevail, you are allowed to offend me and I can cry over it. But
exactly.
I still defend your right to say it. But I'm concerned that we're going to get into this kind of tug of war with Bitcoin.
Well, we absolutely are, because what's happening is sanctions, right? So we're either limiting what people can do in the financial system, or in the case with Russia, potentially moving them out of the financial system altogether. So if we kick Russia out of the SWIFT system, out of the banking system, or limit their ability to even use it for that matter, then what do? They just go into a hole and just die? No, they just figure out how to work around it. So if they really cared about keeping the Russia in, then they would want to have them inclusive. If they kick them out, all they're doing is forcing them to use something different. Same as the Canadians. So the Canadians, they were kicked out. Their bank accounts were frozen, etc. I know some of them have started coming back online, but now all those people have to find a way to survive without the financial system. If you and I were having a party, or let's say I was having a party, and I said, hey, you're being too noisy. You got to go outside. And hey, you're doing this. You go outside and you go outside and you go outside. Next thing you know, I'm the only one left at the party. And everybody else went and started their own party. And I have no control over that party because I kicked them out of my party. And so that's kind of what's happened with the financial system. In Canada, kicking them out of the financial system. Russia, kicking them out of the financial system. They have no other choice but to find another way. Now, Bitcoin, sure. Cryptocurrencies, okay. They just made a $650 billion deal with China to sell them natural gas in euros. So should we outlaw euros as well? Maybe, right? And so like, where does this go, right? If you don't use the money that we say that we have complete control and we kick you out of, then you can't use anything else? Like, how does that even make any sense?
Okay. We're gonna get to the whole complete control thing. Remind me. We need to talk about that. Yeah, complete control. And the end game and all that stuff. But something I've actually been really curious about, I'd like to get your opinion on, is if we all do adopt this new system, right, to fight tyranny, and I'm ready to do it. We're all adopting it. What seriously though, like what happens if the internet shuts off?
Yeah. So that's a big question that's asked all the time. I think it's a little ridiculous. And so what I would say to that is I don't think in things in terms of absolutes. There is no absolutes in life. I think in things in terms of probabilities. Aliens could come destroy the world tomorrow. The probability of that happening is barely above zero, right? Maybe right, it's not zero. Anything could happen, right? So what happens if the internet turns off? So like the entire world's internet goes off forever and never comes back? The probability of that happening is almost zero. So the internet is a layer. And so you have about 7 layers. It starts with the wires, the fibers in the ground. Then it goes up to the switches, and then it goes up to like the TCP/IP protocols, the IP addresses, the DNS, domain name servers, and then the ISPs, internet service providers. So in China, they have the Great Firewall of China, right? So there's no Google, Facebook, none of that's allowed in China. But people use VPNs and they get around that. They can shut off that's the ISP. They route around that. We can use Tor. Well, let's say that they stop that and now the DNS doesn't work anymore. Well, if we still have the IP address, we can just go directly to the website. The internet is pretty censorship resistant. We know this because using BitTorrent, I can still download music and movies. They've never been able to stop that. So the probability of the entire world's internet going down and never coming back is barely above zero. They would be cutting off their own communication. Now, let's say that it happens more regional. Okay. So for example, before the pandemic broke out, Hong Kong was being taken over by China and there was massive protests going on. Of course, the world didn't come out to protect democracy in Hong Kong like they are in Ukraine, but that's a whole nother story. But when that was happening, China was shutting down all the communications in Hong Kong so they couldn't organize. So phones and internet were taken down, to your point, in that area. But what they did was on their phones, they use something called mesh networks. And a mesh network allows me to build my own network. And so everybody that has this mesh network on their phone, we create our own network. And they can't stop that. They can't shut that down. And so in Hong Kong, they're using these mesh networks and they were still using that to connect, to share information. And we can even send Bitcoin over a mesh network.
That's really interesting because that is one of the things that does just concern me, because I know when we talk about low probabilities, we'd also had said, there's a low probability that the world would shut down for 2 years. We'd sort of think, why would they do that? That would, screw themselves. That's kind of my concern. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but like I said, they'd literally have to rip the wires out of the ground. And okay, great. So you rip the wires out of the ground. Now we have satellites.
Yeah, like, I'm with you. We saw what Elon Musk did recently for Ukraine, which was really interesting. But it's interesting because we've just gone from, the world has gone from BLM to COVID, and it's gone from COVID like straight to a war. Now, I want to just preface my next question by saying all war is bad, because apparently you need to make that clear. People don't think that people are human enough to, hate war. All war is bad. All killings all over the world are bad. Murders are bad. I don't support any kind of war. But my question is, it just seems like the timing just seems off. And then it's not just the timing, it's also the I need to think about the way that I say this. It's also the oh my god, the word, like the priority that it's getting, right?
Yeah, sure.
And we saw, just to say, we saw Chamath a few months ago sort of talk about how what's happening in China is sort of below his line of caring. So
Yeah.
why is this not below everybody's line of caring?
Well, we think whatever they want us to think. Whatever gets the news, whatever gets 24/7 rotation, whatever fills up our feeds, that's what we think about. Whatever they want us to think about. Back to your point, though, all war is bad. Sure, 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill. I believe that. And what's crazy about war is that, people in the U.S. don't hate the people in Russia. People in Russia don't hate the people in Ukraine. It's the governments that may do, right? And so that people have to go to war and kill each other is ridiculous. The people in Ukraine don't hate the people in Russia. There was a famous story in I think it was World War II, and it might have been between the UK. I forget the details, but they were in these trenches for days or weeks, and there was like this zone that nobody could pass, and they were just basically stuck there. And it was like Christmas Eve, and there was like a ceasefire, and the soldiers like came out and started playing some music and put some trees out. And next thing you know, all the soldiers from both sides who had been there for weeks or months, holed up trying to kill each other, were out celebrating together. Right? We're all people. We don't hate people in Russia, Ukraine, whatever. It's the leaders. That's the problem that we need to talk about. So I agree with you. War is bad. But I think it's, in my opinion, so from a zoomed out lens, this isn't really like random or a black swan. So you talked about how did it go from one narrative to the next and so fast? Well, I think if you zoom out and you look at things a little bit differently from a bigger lens, maybe they become a little bit more clear. So what do I mean by that? Well, I've been doing a lot of work into these like 3 revolutionary cycles that are converging right now. So history, although it progresses like exponentially, it also repeats over and over and over. So we have these cycles that continue. And the reason why is because as humans, we have that. So there's a political cycle, a 250-year cycle. There's a technological cycle that operates on a 50-year time frame, and a financial revolution cycle on an 80-year. So an 80, a 50, and a 250. But all 3 are converging right now, which I believe explains why the world has gone completely mad and why it's moving as fast as it is right now. So there's a famous quote from Vladimir Lenin from Russia, and he says that there's decades where nothing seems to happen, and then there's days where decades seem to happen. And that's exactly kind of where we're at right now, right? We just went from this whole COVID war for 2 years, and now all of a sudden, forget, no one even knows about that anymore, kind of a thing. And so these days or decades are happening. But this kind of fits into, I'm sure you've heard about the fourth turning, which is an 80-year cycle. So you've never heard about the book, The Fourth Turning?
No.
Everybody in Bitcoin's heard about the fourth turning. You've probably heard this. So it's an 80-year cycle. It's broken up by 4 20-year cycles. And it's something called generational theory. So you've probably heard that hard times create strong men.
Oh, yeah. I have. Yeah. Yeah.
So hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create bad times or hard times, and then the hard times create strong men again. So it's like this cycle, and it's kind of this generational theory. And part of it's like my grandfather was a farmer in Iowa, and I mean, to live on the farm and work on the farm is ridiculous hard work. People have this romantic vision of it. It's not easy. My father grew up on the farm, but then left the farm to start a business, and he was the hardest worker I've ever met. Not as hard as my grandfather. My dad made me go work with him when I was a kid, and I hated him for it. And I'm an extremely hard worker because of that, but I'm not near as a hard worker as my dad. And my kids, I can't even get them to clear the table, right? So it's like 4 generations. So that's kind of how it works. But what's interesting is on these 80-year cycles, about every 84 years, there's a populist uprising or a regime change. So 84 years ago was the end of World War II. That was Hitler, Mussolini. In the U.S., we had FDR's New Deal. 84 years before that, Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, which led to the European Spring, which is the largest revolution in history. 3 times 84 equals 252. So every 250 years, there's a revolution cycle. So 250 years ago was the American Revolution, the French Revolution. 250 years before that was the Protestant Reformation. So about every 250 years, there's this revolution that happens. And of course, this is the cycle that we're in right now. So while a lot of people are like, well, Mark, this is a black swan event. Who would have ever predicted that a virus would come and the whole world would lock down, to the point you made earlier? Well, history would have predicted that. As a matter of fact, it tells us right now we're in a regime change cycle and a revolution cycle, and it's happening right now. And as we just kind of talked about, in Hong Kong, and actually before the pandemic broke out, there was 10 countries with over 1 million people each protesting.
Wow.
That was before the pandemic. So
That's
this
insane.
this is not about a pandemic. This is not about some black swan virus. This is about a revolution. And what is the revolution? The revolution is peak centralization. And the world is pushing back on peak centralization to move into decentralization. So 250 years ago, the American French Revolution, the Americans were pushing back on the centralization of the monarchy. And we created a decentralized government. The United States is a republic, 50 independent states. It wasn't 50 at the time. 250 years before that was the Protestant Reformation, which at the time the church and the state had a complete monopoly on control. The printing press, as I mentioned earlier, decentralized the information. And when people were able to read that, they said, wait a minute, you've been lying to us all this time. We don't need you. And it moved into a decentralized thing. So right now we're at peak centralization. It's easy to see. World Economic Forum, World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, IMF, UN, etc. We're at peak centralization, but the world is pushing back. We don't want that, and that's why there's eruptions all over the world right now, if that makes sense.
It does. I have several questions. Okay,
course.
so the idea of peak centralization. So, so my most basic. Oh my gosh, wow. Okay, I don't know if it's a basic question or not, but okay, let's go for it. So peak centralization. To what extent is this revolution then of decentralization going to win? Because I think that we're seeing a lot of the infrastructure already be put in place. Majid Nawaz, who I absolutely love, talks about the vax passports and how that's needed for CBDCs. So the infrastructure is there, and the whole social credit system and stuff like that. And it's very clear. It's very clear, in my opinion, that those in power have a huge amount of control over the narrative. The way we can just go from 2 years, you can go from not just 2 years, but you can go from an actual protest in Canada where people are literally in prison in their own country. They can't leave. They don't have a certain kind of medical procedure happen to them, to a war that nobody's talking about what just happened. The fact that we can do that so quickly just shows how much power these people, the elite, have over what's happening, and they're being honest about it. So the first question is, to what extent are we going to win this revolution in terms of decentralization?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I'm going to answer it, and then I'm going to go back and explain it. So we do win. All right.
Okay.
We will win. We do win. History tells us that. Now, we'll go back and set that up. So kind of to the point that you're making, you're absolutely right. And that is about the social credit score system, the CBDCs, et cetera, and about the narrative. So what do I mean by that? Back to the 1500s, right? The church had a complete monopoly on information, and they told people that you had to buy your salvation, and you had to do these things for the church and all these things. But when people got the information, they said, wait a minute, you're lying to us. This is not how it goes. And the church, anyone who would read that or speak out on it was labeled a heretic. You probably heard that word, heresy, and they were killed, right? But it didn't matter. Didn't matter how hard they tried to squeeze. It didn't matter how many people they killed. The information was out. The technology changed it. They lost their grip. Today, we're in the same situation where they've realized this peak centralization, WF, IMF, et cetera. They've realized that they have lost the narrative, to your point. Like I said, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, they're getting 100 times more views than any other of their sources. And just like the printing press, the internet has disrupted their grip. Now, I think what they've done is they've realized, like, shoot, we're losing this. We need to crack down now. We need to get this final piece put in place or we're going to lose all control. And we're going to kill people to do it. Now, not killing people like in the Protestant Reformation, but killing people as far as deplatforming them, assassinating their character, cancel culture, et cetera. And so I think what we're seeing is that was the race that I was alluding to. The race is, can they install a social credit score system in place, which would include a CBDC, right? It would include a global ID. Can they install that before enough people wake up and push back and overthrow that? And so that's really the race. I made the statement that we win, and I'll kind of explain that. But they are trying their best to control the narrative. Like I said, we think whatever they want us to think. If they want us to think that COVID's the big thing, it is. If they want us to think that Canada is, and now it's Ukraine is the thing. But really, it's the race to get that. And so I was thinking that this was all coming to a head. Remember, these 3 cycles are converging. I haven't talked about the other 2, the technological and the financial, but it's all coming to a head right around 2025. And I was thinking it's really like, 2024 to 2026 range.
Okay.
And so I was thinking that's the time. Now, what's interesting about that is that the central bank digital currencies are not ready. Right. So China has rolled theirs out. China's rolled theirs out, but the US Fed doesn't have theirs. The ECB doesn't have theirs yet. But we know that the Fed's working on it pretty fast, right? We know that they've been working on it for about a year and a half. We know that they just opened it up to comments about like a month ago. So it's coming along pretty quick. I'm guessing there's another 12 to 24 months before it's ready to roll out. And this whole social credit score system doesn't really work until they get that CBDC. It's kind of like that last piece they need in there. And so I think if you understand that, or I should not understand it, but maybe kind of see what I'm going with this. That's the goal. If I was like herding cattle or sheep across the countryside, for example, my goal is to move these sheep across the countryside and get them into a pen over here at the end. But, I have a lot of land to cover. And so I have to kind of push them here, and I have to kind of push them here, and I have to kind of push them here. And so over here is the push from the virus. And over here is the push from the protest. And over here is the push on the cyber pandemic, right? And each one of these is pushing us to the ultimate goal, which is the social credit score system. So none of these pieces, the vaccine passport, none of those pieces are the ultimate goal. It's one push to get us to the ultimate goal, which is the social credit score system. And it all hinges on that CBDC. Without freedom to transact, there is no freedom, period. So I have the right in the United States. I have the freedom. The First Amendment guarantees me the right to assemble, to go protest or whatever. Well, if I don't have money to put gas in my car to drive to the assembly or buy a bus ticket to go to the assembly, I have no freedom. I have freedom of speech. Well, if I have no money to buy a computer to post online or print a pamphlet or build a website, I have no freedom of speech. I have the freedom of religion. Well, if my church can't afford to pay a payment on a building or can't pay their staff, there's no freedom of religion. So there is no freedom without the freedom of payments. And that's what the CBD, that's where they come in, if that makes sense. And so I think what they've realized over the last 2 years, they're losing their grip, and they had to do something. They needed to really escalate this, speed this up to try to hang onto that grip. The problem is the more they squeeze, the more people push back. Newton's third law says in physics is each force has an equal and opposite reaction. So the more they squeeze, the more people push back. But the more people push back, the more they squeeze. The more they squeeze, the more people push back. And now we're at this situation where it's escalated to the point where they're literally kicking people out of the financial system and forcing people to go build a parallel society, which is a whole nother topic.
But the thing with Russia does confuse me, because it's not as if, Russia is this noble country. Like, they're doing some bad things, right? Like, I've seen there are bombs going off in Ukraine. Like, that's obvious. But what I don't understand is how that comes into play with everything that's going on. I'm not saying it's not real. Like, let's just be clear. Obviously not saying that's not real. But there's something going on. Mm-hmm. Like, it's strange.
Yeah.
That we've just gone from one narrative to another. And also, sorry, just to say as well, and also just like the amount, like I was saying earlier, the amount of priority Ukraine is getting in the media.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a weird time where we don't know what to believe anymore, right? We know that our governments have lied to us nonstop. They've admitted that they've lied to us. They've admitted that they've run psyops, psychological operations against us. We see our media using techniques like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, against us. And so now it's like we don't know who to trust. It's like that boy who cried wolf, and we just can't trust them anymore. And so it's very difficult to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Again, I think if you zoom out and look at really this peak centralization, I think that the world has been taken over by bankers. So if you had like a business org chart, the way that the world was formed, at the very top sits the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements. They're at the top of the org chart. And then below that, then you have the World Economic Forum and you have the IMF, and these are like the policy makers. So they set these policies and they push them down. Below that, you have the governments, and those are the policy enforcers. Then you have the media that distribute those policies, the information, and then we have us, the people at the bottom. And so when you look at that and what's the goal here? Well, the big goal, if they want to get the whole world into this type of a system with peak centralization, is they have to bring down, unfortunately, and I hate to admit this because I'm an American, but they have to bring down America. America is the shining example on the hill of freedom. It's the greatest experiment that's ever been done. It's brought more people out of poverty than any experiment in the history of the world, and we're the only nation in the world that has guns. And so America has to fall, and we want to transfer the power from the West, which is America, Western Europe, Canada, et cetera, and it has to transfer from the West to the East. And so if you would agree with that, or maybe at least kind of see what that picture may look like, then maybe it brings a little bit of clarity to this war with Russia, because really, what's the objective here, right? The objective is to bring the U.S. down and push power to the East so we can install a social credit system. So what's going on with the war? And again, I'm not saying this is fake. I believe there are real bombs being dropped in Ukraine, and I do believe people are really dying. But is it part of the narrative? Maybe, maybe not. I don't, and just to be clear, I don't view this as like some conspiracy where 5 people in a room have kept power over the world for the last 500 years. I look at it more like if you see a flock of birds flying around, and they all kind of keep this formation as they're flying. They didn't sit on the ground and say, "Hey, Larry, over there, you take the left corner, and Bob, you go over there on the right." Like they didn't plan it out. They happen to just kind of move together. And so that's kind of the way that I see it. This isn't like some like 5 people in a room, but it's like they're all working together. But if you look at it through that lens where it's a coup, the world's been taken over by the central bankers. They're all kind of working together in this power, like the policymakers, World Economic Forum, IMF, et cetera. And the goal is then to install the social credit score system. So we have to bring the U.S. down, right? Have to kind of destroy that example and then get rid of guns, et cetera, and transfer the power to the East. So then now let's look at Russia and Ukraine through that lens, okay? So then there's a war with Russia, and what's happening? Well, one, it looks like the world still is fighting for democracy, so we don't look like we've gone too far. 2, really what we're doing is destabilizing the markets and destabilizing the U.S. dollar's reserve currency status. We're pushing Russia out of either out of SWIFT or sanctioning them very difficult to force them to find another option. They've now just made deals with China to give them their energy. So what does China really, really need? China really, they don't have resources, right? They don't have water. They don't have energy. They don't have like coal. They don't have natural gas. They don't have wheat, but they do now. They just got all that from Russia. And why did they get it from Russia? Well, because Russia was selling all their energy to Europe because Europe decided not to get theirs out of the ground anymore. And so they were dependent on Russia for it. But now Russia just made a deal to give it all to China. So what happens to Europe, Western Europe, and America now? They fall.
That's not good.
They fall. And what's the goal? Well, but what's the goal? To bring those down so we can transfer the power. So I think if you look at it from that lens, maybe it gets more clear, or maybe I'm just crazy. I don't know.
No, I get it. My question is, I often think that those in charge of America, let's just look at America for a second, pretty bad people, right? Like for me, I think I don't just think Biden is senile. I think he's bad as well. Same with Kamala Harris. And so my confusion would be, why would they want this war if that brings the West down?
So again, back to that org chart, the governments are actually like on the 3rd row down there, and they're more policy enforcers. And so an example of this, and if you look back, back to kind of this World Economic Forum, and they meet in Davos every year, right? In Davos, Switzerland. And I think it was 2017, Donald Trump, then President Donald Trump, went to Davos, and he gave a speech. And he gave a speech that said, because at the time, the U.S. had just gotten into the Paris Agreement, or the Paris Accord, I should say. And the Paris Accord is basically a way that we lay down our sovereignty and comply to all these rules that the IPCC or the WF put out. And Donald Trump went there and he said, the U.S. is a sovereign nation. The U.S. will never lay down our sovereignty to the rest of the world. My job is to look out for the American people. Now, we're always going to be willing to work with everybody else, but my job is the America first, right? That's what Donald Trump ran on, America first, make America great again. He says that the U.S. will never lay down its sovereignty. At that point, at that speech, is when the entire world came after him, all guns blazing. No. The U.S. needs to take its place. Now, when Donald Trump left office and Biden took office again, what was the very first thing that they did on day one?
They rejoined.
Rejoined and laid down the America's sovereignty to the NGOs, non-governmental organizations.
Why though? Why is it so political? Like, why do you have a Republican doing one thing? I know he's kind of an independent, and then why do the Democrats do that? I mean, surely it's still America first, regardless of which side you're on.
Well, it's not America first. When Obama was in office before.
No, I know, but why not?
When Obama was in office before, he was the first president that started going around and apologizing for America to the world. Obama started apologizing. He started. He brought the UN into the United States. Why? To lay down its sovereignty, to work on this globalist agenda.
Right. So you're basically saying that the Democrats or very key people.
I don't want to say left or right, Democrats or Republicans. Okay. I think that the establishment is all in on this. And so again, peak centralization. We're going into what I'm calling a blow off top of centralization. And so we're in this parabolic run into centralization, and we've all laid down the government just take care of education. Oh, the government just take care of healthcare. Oh, the government just take care of everything, right? And so we've given the government, the nanny state, everything, and we're at this blow off top. All the world leaders have started to buy into these bankers because how did they do this? It's always about the money, right? So it's a coup of the bankers at the top. So you mentioned earlier, how did the whole world lock down at the one time? Right? Mm-hmm. That's easy. That's easy. I can explain that in a second.
Tell me.
Yeah, sure. Easy. So they went to each country and they said, hey, per our models, the whole world's going to die and your entire nation's going to be completely ravaged and you're going to go bankrupt because there's going to be no tourism. There's going to be no food. There's going to be famine and you're all going to die. But don't worry. We got your back. What we're going to do is we're going to give you, 500 billion or 700 billion or 900 million or whatever the amount is. And we're going to help you. We're going to give you all that money. So you don't die. Your country's good. Is that cool? Okay. But in order to do that and to save the world, we're going to give you that money, but you needed to kind of follow the protocols that we set. And they all did. Now we know this to be true because multiple countries told us this. So like the president of Belarus, the dictator, whatever you want to call him, he kept turning down their offers. And finally it was like 900 million. I talked about this on Peter McCormick's podcast. They fact checked me in real time and they found the headline to show that. But multiple nations have said that. And that's what happened. They paid them to do this. So how do all these nations go along with it? They do it through the money, right? It's the bankers that took over the world.
This is so fascinating because so at first I was quite upset to be, I know it sounds kind of ridiculous, but I was quite upset to be watching or living in a time where we have these lockdowns. Like it was very difficult. But now I'm kind of grateful to be watching all of this play out. Like for me, it's insane. And then El Salvador just comes right into this. To me, El Salvador is like at the center of all of this because like you said, it's all about the money, right? Yeah. And not all countries are following what's going on. So like Dubai had a little bit of a lockdown, but then it just stopped. So like Dubai is very much out of this, I think. You have Israel, for example, who pushed everything so hard.
The hardest, yeah.
And I'm not surprised because for me, like Israel is just an extension of America.
But they ended.
Yeah, well, everything's ending because of course it's ending. Yeah. But I mean, like
last night at the State of the Union, none of the people on there were wearing masks, and they were all shaking hands. It was just over, gone.
So since it's all about the money,
of course, because the media has got us all, hey, look over there. we don't notice that, oh, wait a minute,
So
they just
frustrating.
pivoted. You mean the CDC just came out and said everyone that was deplatformed for saying these things, they were right all along? But you'd never admit that because, oh, look over there, by the way.
I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you, which is why I refuse to give so much attention to things which I wouldn't usually give attention to.
Yeah.
But just on the previous point about it all being about the money, El Salvador is clearly not in this globalist, club, right? Like that is
No,
very evident.
and they have a lot of they're coming under a lot of fire because of that.
Right. So let's go into that. Because so firstly, since all about the money, because they're not in that, they can actually promote healthy eating and healthy this to fight off the big bad virus, right? Which was amazing to see. Nayib Bukele, I think he even quoted Biden this morning or last night with the Iranian people, which was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So how much trouble are they going to be in? And what other countries aren't part of this big globalist agenda that can also start raising money through Bitcoin bonds and things like that?
Yeah. Well, it, again, right. We've been lied to. We know we've been lied to. They've admitted they've lied to us. They've admitted propaganda and psyops against us. They admitted that they caused more fear to get people to comply. They've admitted this. This is stuff that's been in writing and been on interviews. And so
Yeah.
now we're very skeptical, and now it's hard to believe anything. And so
Yeah.
I try to always remember that because I don't want to get too skeptical. Once you start believing in conspiracies, everything's a conspiracy, and that's not necessarily
Yeah.
true either. However, that being said, multiple leaders of countries in Africa, in Haiti, they told us that they were getting bribed to do this, and then multiple ones that didn't go along with it ended up dead. And I'm sure it was all just coincidence, but it's kind of weird, right? Now,
Yeah.
as far back to El Salvador, he's coming under a lot of fire, right? Heavy fire from the IMF for not going along with it. And I just saw, I believe yesterday or day before, there's a new bill that the United States is trying to put forward that wants to go after El Salvador because of Bitcoin as well, because he's destabilizing the financial system, supposedly.
What little El Salvador, tiny, tiny El Salvador is
Well, what they're
destabilizing
Yeah,
the.
well, because of terrorism, because terrorists could be running money through there supposedly. Never mind the $80 billion in weapons or $800 million of weapons that we gave to Afghanistan. Afghanistan has more Black Hawk helicopters than the UK does now. Never mind that. The little bit of money you run through El Salvador could be the problem. But there's a bill that the United States is putting together right now to find ways to go after El Salvador because of Bitcoin. Obviously, the IMF is super mad about it, and the BIS, they've been making lots of comments about them destabilizing the financial system. So I think it's going to be a big uphill road for El Salvador. Obviously, I'm rooting for them. I've been down there working with Bitcoin Beach. I love it.
Nice.
What I'd really like to see is we really need more nations to jump on board with this. So let's hope we're hoping that this bond sale kicks off, gets oversubscribed, and more nations want to jump into that. I think Fidelity put out a report. They said they think that I think it was 2 or 3 more sovereigns will come into Bitcoin this year. And we really need to see that, because if El Salvador is just out there on their own, I mean, it's going to be dangerous for them.
Which do you think will come next? I know Panama have introduced a similar bill, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Brazil's been talking about it. Costa Rica's been talking about it. We've seen like Uruguay talking about it. I would say, Panama has Panama is likely, the U.S. is going to be the last nation because they have
Yes,
the dollar, right, reserve.
of course.
Nations that don't have their own that don't have the dollar would be more likely, specifically ones that maybe use the dollar, right? So if I'm my own nation with my own currency, I might not want to give up control to print my
Yeah.
own currency, but if I'm using the dollar, I have no control over that anyway. So why not just switch over? So I would say it's going to be nations down there that use dollars already. Well, the next one I guess is Tonga, but that's kind of so tiny it doesn't really matter. Not it doesn't matter. Sorry if you're Tongan, but yeah, maybe Panama, maybe Costa Rica, maybe Brazil, probably one of those nations.
Any thoughts on Turkey?
Yeah, I mean Turkey could really use it for sure. Lebanon could really use it. I don't know.
Have to see.
I don't have a prediction on that. But back to the kind of where we started earlier, which is when the pain is high enough. Remember, pleasure and pain.
Correct. Yeah.
And right now, people are being motivated by pain, most likely. And so Turkey obviously has massive pain there. Lebanon has massive pain there. I saw a report that said in Russia, I think a couple days ago, Bitcoin transactions were up 250% in a
Hmm.
day because the pain was so high. And so, yeah, Turkey,
I think
anywhere
that
that's
was
seen.
Ukraine. I think it was Ukraine. The 200% one. I think that was Ukraine.
Oh, was it Ukraine?
Was it? Yeah, I think it was. But yeah,
Yeah, I thought either way, one of those.
yeah.
There was an article that came out that said Putin said that if they get hit with sanctions hard enough, they would come after citizens' deposits. So if I was a citizen in Russia and I saw that headline, I would probably want to get my money out of the bank account, right?
Wait, just on that point though, because I saw Mastercard and Apple. I didn't even read it properly. What did they do? Because I saw on the tube people, or we call it the tube here in London, on the
Yeah.
train, people
Oh,
weren't
okay.
able to use their Apple Pay to get on public transport. Were you following what happened?
No, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, Mastercard and Apple have done something. I don't know. Guys, you can let us know in the comments because I'm not gonna quickly surf the internet. But yeah, Mastercard and Apple started stopping. Yeah, go on. Let's have a look. I can't remember what it was.
In the UK?
No, in Russia.
Oh, in Russia.
Apple joins other global giants and exit.
Yeah, Visa,
They,
MasterCard block Russian financial
yeah,
institutions. Yeah. Ukraine war, long lines for ATMs in Russia as West restricts cashless payments. By the time you have to wait in the line, it's too late. Just for everybody listening. Don't wait until you have to wait in line. It's too late. But yeah, I see Visa, MasterCard block Russian banks from payment networks. That's probably what you're talking about.
yeah, that's it. I mean, why are they doing that? It's
Because
so weird. Why didn't they do that in other countries? I
well,
know we've gone through this.
we're calling out. There was headlines in the United States of kicking all Russian students out of the country.
That's awful and ridiculous.
And back to my point, as an American, nobody in America is mad at Russians. Nobody in Russia is probably mad at people in Ukraine. It's the leaders. They're the ones causing all these problems.
Yeah, I'm reading just through some of the comments that people are saying.
And that's
I've
why
got
we
those
always
open.
say with Bitcoin, it's always fix the money, fix the world. It's all about fixing the money. And there's a million reasons why it all boils down to fixing the money. But these world leaders get all
Yeah.
their power by having a money printer, by controlling the money printer, which is, of course, what we're seeing play out now with Russia and kicking them out and sanctions. And what if they go to a different currency and blah, 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 blah. Nobody should have that power.
Mm. So Ted Cruz did this speech. Did you see the speech about Bitcoin at the conference?
I saw a clip. I saw some clips of it. I didn't see the whole thing, but
Yeah, it was
from the clips I saw, it was good.
yeah, it was a pretty cool speech. But he kind of put this real political spin on Bitcoin. And I'd love to hear your thoughts because
Mhm.
before we go into it, my perception, right, is like the technology is apolitical, but I just can't be convinced that the ideology is apolitical because to me, it's just not.
Well, one, I would say that I don't know if I would necessarily agree with your statement that he put a very political spin on it.
Well, he
What's
said liberals don't like it. He said liberals don't like it because they can't control it. I think that's what he
Yeah,
said.
no, yeah, I was gonna say he did say that. But where I see a little nuance to that is that
Yeah.
in the United States and probably I'm sure over in Western Europe as well, freedom is now like a extreme right-wing view.
Mm-hmm.
To like want freedom, to me, that is not political. I want freedom. Now, Donald Trump, I mean, he's an authoritarian too. He wanted to also tell me what to do. No, he didn't want to control me as much as Biden did per se, but they both wanted to tell me what to do.
Yes, that's
They're
true.
both authoritarians. I want freedom. I want nobody to tell me what to do. So which party am I for? I've always said that I'm for the party that gives me more freedom and less government. Which one is that, right? I don't know. I don't know which one that is. But is so to that comment that he made, the liberals or the left or whatever he said want to restrict your movement, restrict your money, restrict your payments. One, that's true. And two, the fact that I don't want my money or my freedom restricted, does that mean that I'm the opposite party? And so that's where I think, like I
Okay.
said, freedom has become like political, but it's not. Like freedom to transact or freedom to live my life. Why is that political?
Because that's the libertarian way, right? And libertarianism is a political ideology.
Yeah, I suppose. I know what you're saying. I mean, a lot of people were mad about Ted Cruz coming out
Yeah.
and kind of claiming it. And part of the reason why is back to where we started, which is if Russia starts to use it, that's a way to demonize it. If Ted Cruz and the Republicans use it, it's a way to demonize it. The problem is that when we saw when BLM and Antifa were burning down the United States everywhere, at a lot of BLM rallies, they were on stage telling people to get your money out of the banks and buy Bitcoin. So BLM and Antifa
Mm,
were using it, and that's certainly not Republican. So they were saying
yeah.
to do it. And now the Republicans say this. So Bitcoin is money for enemies. Bitcoin is for everybody, and everybody can benefit from it. It's a tool, right? A screwdriver could fix my car, but a screwdriver could also stab somebody as well, right? And so it's like, how do you use that tool? Unfortunately, both sides are going to use that tool. To your point, though, and again, not to get political, but one side does seem more bent on really imposing their regulations on you. And so I guess it does work against that.
Do you think that in the next election it's going to become a key like
Yeah.
voting point?
Well, it already is. So in the United States, we have midterms coming up here at the end of the
Yeah.
year, towards the end of the year here in the United States, and we've already seen many people trying to run on this pro Bitcoin platform. So,
I
for
hate it.
example, yeah, and I don't really like it either, and I'm afraid that people are going to fall for this. So,
Yes.
for example, the mayor in New York kind of ran on this. I'm gonna make it the greatest Bitcoin city, and then all of a sudden he works to shut Bitcoin mining down. Like, wait a minute, all these people that voted for that kind of got the bait and switch. In California, I mentioned earlier, Rep. Brad Sherman, who's been one of the biggest outspoken critics of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies because it takes away the U.S. ability to sanction. There's somebody trying to run against him, Erica Rhodes. I had her on my radio show, and so she's running on this pro Bitcoin platform, but then she's pro welfare and pro UBI, and I don't see how those go together, because if I can't create money from thin air, then how can I have a UBI, right? So I would tell people to beware of this. We see in Texas right now, Texas being this big free state, kind of the Bitcoin capital of the United States, really the Bitcoin capital of the world, probably with mining power anyway. Governor Abbott is facing re-election, and there's people challenging him, and they're running on pro Bitcoin stuff, like we're going to make Bitcoin legal tender, or we're going to put laws in to protect Bitcoin. So I do see that. Now, I guess to your question, will we see that in the next presidential election?
Mm.
It's 2 years away, or no, it's a couple years away. Yeah, 2 years away. My prediction says probably no. 2 years is a long time right now. I would say no. I
A
think,
day is a long time.
yeah, I mean, going back to kind of where I was talking about these three converging cycles, which we didn't get all the way through, but I was saying it kind of comes to a head around 2025, which is really like 2024 to 2026 kind of. I think things continue to get worse for the next couple of years. So I would guess that my prediction says no. I would say that a president doesn't run on that in 2 years.
I'm just gonna pick you up on that. So you said we didn't get through it. I do want to get through it. So you predict that it gets worse up until 2025, where we hit a crescendo. Is that correct?
Yeah, the blow off top. That's what I'm calling it.
Yeah, the blow off top. I like that. Okay, so we hit the blow off top, and I know that the agenda is 2030. That's obviously being sped up to 2025. What happens in 2025?
Well, I just think it's the blow off top, right? So if you look at financial markets, so if you look at, the dot-com boom, or look at, Bitcoin in 2017, et cetera, and you see, back to the pleasure and pain, it starts sucking so many people in that it goes into this parabolic run. Now, if you study any blow off tops in financial markets, the reason why it starts going so high is because it starts sucking everybody in. But you also know at the very top is when it becomes the most volatile. It's super
Mm-hmm.
volatile at the top, and then it blows off, boom, right, and crashes back down. And I think that's what we're seeing from centralization or socialism or whatever you want to call it today. Whereas I kind of made the case earlier, it's like, hey, government, you just take care of education and daycare, and you take care of healthcare, and you take care of everything. We've just assigned everything to the nanny state, and we're kind of getting this blow off top. And now it's getting very volatile. Right now, all across the world, people are pushing back. There's protests going on everywhere, not because of a virus, because of centralization. What they're doing is they're pushing back on governments restricting their freedom. Now, the virus was a reason to do that. The money could be a reason, or XYZ, whatever could be the reason. Now, potentially war. Now, this is another, I'm going to jump into this rabbit hole real quick.
Yeah.
So I made the case earlier that this is really a war on information. Right.
Yes.
That's the war. Just like in the 1500s, it was a war on information. Today, it's a war on information because they're losing their grip on the narrative. Now, if we're in a war, and we're fighting to get information out there, they're fighting to censor information so it doesn't get out there, right? That would be the battleground. So our job, you and I, we're creating content trying to wake people up to this. What are they doing to win the war? Well, they have to stop people like us from getting information out there. Okay, so if you maybe see things through that lens, well, how can they do that? How can they stop us from putting information out there? Well, if you're in China, under a social credit score system, you say something bad about the government, they just disappear you. They can't really do that in the U.S. Or they can't do that in the U.S. They can't do that in the U.K. In the U.S., we still have freedom of speech. Kind of. Obviously, we can be deplatformed, so Twitter, YouTube, et cetera, can kick me off. But other than kicking me off of the main platforms, what can they really do? They don't have a lot of options. Unless maybe they do. So what could be a good reason to have extra powers to take away people's ability to say things? Well, if we look back through history, we can see at least 4 times in the United States, they've taken people's ability away to say things. So in the late 1700s, the Sedition Act of 1798, Sedition Act of 1918, the Smith Act, I think 1940. And basically what happens is in a time of war, if anybody were to say anything about the government or the leaders that could make them look bad or somehow discredit them, it's punishable up to 20 years in prison under a war. Under a war. Now we're going to war, right? Are we really going to war? Is it a made-for-TV war? I mean, people are really dying. I'm not saying that. But could war be used as a way to win the war on information? How else can they stop it? Because they can't stop the internet, right? I've already kind of given that case.
Yeah.
They can't stop the internet. They can't stop BitTorrent from downloading movies. And they can kick people off of YouTube, but they can't stop them putting it up on decentralized platforms like, blockchain, like Odyssey or whatever, right? But what if they could put them in prison for 20 years? Now, in China, they can, but the U.S., they can't. Well, actually, they can. They've done it multiple times in history under war. That's kind of interesting, isn't it?
So 2025,
okay,
you
back
feel
to
like
2025,
No, I like this. No, it's cool. So 2025, you feel that's the turning point?
Yeah. And so a couple things about that. So one, we talked about this political revolution cycle. There's this 250 year, which we're kind of at to hit that crescendo. But then we have the technological revolution cycle. So that operates on a 50-year time frame. It's 40 to 60. Just like seasons on a calendar. It says spring starts this day, but it doesn't mean the weather changes that exact day. So technology cycles are like 40 to 60 year, but let's call it 50. Now, a technological revolution isn't a new technology. A new technology is like an iPhone. That's cool. Uber's cool, right? A technological revolution is something that changes the course of humanity. There's been 5. Industrial revolution brought people from farms and put them into cities and factories, mass production, etc. Heavy machinery. 2, we had steam engines and railways. So all of humanity, people walked and rode horses. Now we had steam engines and we could move stuff across continents. Then we had electricity and steel. All of humanity, people had candlelight, and now we had electricity. We also had steel. We could build skyscrapers and bridges. Another 50 years after that, we had the age of oil and automobiles and mass production. So for all of humanity, people walked and rode horses, and now we had cars. Pretty cool. Then we had 1971 was the age of the microprocessor, which brought us telecommunications. It brought us the internet, brought us personal computers, brought us mobile phones. Everything that we have today. 1971 plus 50 years puts us at 2021, right about now. And the new technological revolution that we have today is decentralized technology. It's Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin, when electricity came out, what happens as humans is we can't really imagine the future. We try to take something new and we try to understand it by comparing it to something that we know. If you're trying to explain something to a blind person, it'd be very difficult because they don't have any reference to anything, right? But we try to understand it by something we know. So, for example, when electricity came out, what is this thing? Well, it's kind of like a way to get light without a candle. It's kind of like a digital candle. Well, that's stupid. What do we need that for? Candles have been light for 5,000 years. And look how cool it is. It's portable. I can carry it around. I don't even need all these wires, right? Well, electricity was a way to get light. But of course, it became so much more, right? When the internet first came out, what is this thing? Well, it's a way we can send electronic messages. And we have these like message boards. Maybe one day we could even buy stuff online. But of course, today we have, our cars hooked to something called a cloud, using something called social media to like navigate us around traffic. We didn't know that. And so Bitcoin, what is this decentralized technology? Well, it's kind of a way to transfer money, store money. Well, it is that. Yeah, it is that. But it's going to be so much more. It will change the course of humanity. And of course, problems are supposed to come to, or solutions are supposed to come to problems. So the problem that we're having is peak centralization. The problem that we have is unlimited money printing. The problem that we have is a set of people that constantly change the rule on us, not ruled by law, but ruled by men. The problem that we have is censorship, not just in censorship where I can't say what I want on YouTube, but as I said earlier, without the freedom to transact, there is no freedom. That's censorship. Those are problems that we have. So the solutions would be something with a fixed supply cap. Instead of central control, something that nobody can control. Instead of something that's censorable, it's something that's censorship resistant. Those solutions. And so it's interesting that on a 250-year time frame, we have a political revolution happening, and on a 50-year time frame, we have a new technological revolution that gives us exactly what we need at the exact same time, which is pretty interesting. The third one is on an 80-year time frame. We have a financial revolution cycle. So about every 80 years, the financial system gets reset. 80 years ago, approximately, was the Bretton Woods Agreement. The Bretton Woods Agreement was the entire global financial system was reset onto a one world currency, a gold-backed system. The dollar is the reserve, other currencies pegged to the dollar. And last year, the IMF called for a Bretton Woods 2. That's their words, a Bretton Woods 2. Well, what was Bretton Woods 1? Oh, that was a reset of the entire global financial system onto a one world currency. And now they're calling for that again.
What would a Bretton Woods 2 be?
Well, that's a good question. So a lot of people ask, will the dollar remain as the reserve currency? Will we go back to the gold standard like Peter Schiff thinks? Would we
No way.
would we go to a digital yuan? Will it be a CBDC, like an IMF SDR backed CBDC? But I think everybody's looking at it from the wrong perspective. So they're all looking for a centralized answer, but the future is decentralized. So Bitcoin has been my reserve asset. We see Fortune 500 companies like MicroStrategy, it's their reserve asset. We see nations like El Salvador, it's their reserve asset. So I think the future is much more decentralized. And so everyone's looking for that centralized answer. But back to kind of this coming to a head in 2025. And so the financial system, the bankers have two tools, right? Interest rates and monetary supply. Interest rates are zero or negative in most parts of the world. So that tool's gone. They have monetary supply, but how much more can they create? They've created over $300 trillion in 50 years already, 20 trillion just in the last 2 years. They keep printing, but inflation's raging. So that tool's pretty much done. If you and I were playing a game and we're out of moves, what do? Well, let's reset the game and play again. That's a Bretton Woods 2. Now, I've been thinking, as I kind of said earlier, that they wanted to keep it going. So a lot of people are like, can the Fed keep the markets from crashing? Can they give us a soft landing? Could they taper and raise rates without crashing the markets? They don't want the markets to crash, right? Or maybe they do. That assumes that you have a bias that they want to keep the markets from crashing. But what if they do want them to crash? How do you reset the game? How do you move on to a new system? You have to have a crash.
A lot. I love it.
So all this is converging right now. The financial game is done. They're out of moves. They're out of moves. Interest rates are zero or negative. They can't keep printing money. Inflation's raging high. What happens when inflation rages high is revolution. The catalyst for almost every single revolution is that when people can't eat. And people can't eat when the food's too expensive. And so that's what they're facing. Technology is here, creating a revolution. And now politically, we have a revolution. And it's all coming together. I think it comes to a head, like I said, in the next couple of years. And the reason why is because the financial system being reset, all of them being reset, and then having this new system to put us into the CBD-backed social credit score system. And they can't wait. If they don't do something now, to put us into a new system that they can control, then they lose everything. And so, unfortunately, I think we're going to continue to see more crackdowns. We're probably going to see more regulations. We're going to see more censorship, more deplatforming, more sanctions. It's going to be more. But the more that they do, the more people will push back. The more people they kick out of the financial system, the more people go build a parallel system over here. The more people get deplatformed, the more people go create content over here. Like Alex Jones was the first kind of really big name guy that got killed online. He still gets millions of people watching his shows. They haven't been able to stop that. So all they did was force them to go create a system over here. If you go back and you study the fall of the USSR, the fall of communism back in the 70s and 80s, a couple of people were very instrumental in that. So Solzhenitsyn, he wrote the book Gulag Archipelagos. Václav Havel, he went on to become he got locked up for I think 3 years for his writings, but became the president of Yugoslavia. But they did a lot of writing. It was their writing, it was their information that led to the fall of communism back then. But one thing that they talk about is that they started to build parallel economies. And so what do I mean by that? Well, if I get kicked out of the financial system, then I have to go use a different form of money over here. I can't fight against the education system, but I can pull my kids out and I can put them in a homeschool pod. I can't fight against legacy media, but I can go create my own media company over here. I can't fight against the financial system, but I can just pull my money out and I can go over here. And so the more they try to restrict, the more people leave the party. And by 2025, they're going to find themselves the only person at the party.
That's amazing. I also am interested in the fact that the Bitcoin halving is around 2024.
Oh, there's another good piece.
Yeah, so that's going to be a really interesting part of the puzzle. You have a book coming out, the Uncommunist Manifesto.
Yeah.
Let's hear about it.
Yeah. So Alex Svetsky and I got together a couple of weeks ago and locked ourselves in a rental, an Airbnb for like 5 days and wrote a book. And basically what we did is we took the Communist Manifesto, which I talked about, Marx wrote now about 175 years ago. And the Communist Manifesto has basically gone, it's like an ideology that just won't die. Hundreds of millions of people have died under that socialism regime. And we took that book, which most people haven't read. I actually hadn't read it till about a year ago. And it's a pamphlet. It's a booklet. It's 4 chapters. It's 8,000 words. Most people can read in about 45 minutes. And I would say that if most people would read that book, they would never look at Marxism or socialism or communism the same again. Most people have this dream idea of what that is, but if they would just read that book. So for example, he says, communism can be summed up in one statement: abolition of private property. That's one statement. Wow. Okay, so that's what it stands. He says that the bourgeoisie, the rich, they only have families. They only have families. They only have kids for exploitation, and they only have wives to have kids. And the bourgeoisie, the rich, just share their women. So he believes that all women should just be community property. That's what he says in the book. And women are okay with that. Like women should just be community property. As a matter of fact, in Russia, they actually had that. So I think it was women from like 18 to 25 had to become community property before they could settle down, which Huxley wrote the book, The Brave New World. And that's kind of the story in that book, The Brave New World. So anyway, if people read that book, like if you read that book, you'd probably be pretty turned off by that, right? But so what we did is we took that book and we kept the same structure, 4 chapters, about 8,000 words. I think we came up with 10,000 words. So it's quick. It's a less than an hour read. Same structure. And we took chapter by chapter and we kind of reframed it. And we called it the Uncommunist Manifesto. And he wrote that the struggle, which all humans struggle in life, we have finite resources, so we all struggle. But he said that the struggle was between classes, the rich and the poor, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Hitler said that it was a struggle between races. We reframed it. We said that the real axis of struggle is not between classes or political ideologies. The real axis of struggle is between the individual versus the collectivist trying to pull them into groups. Mm-hmm. And so we reframed it from that standpoint. What we're hoping is that because it's a quick, easy read, because we kept the same format, we're hoping that maybe it could go on to open people's eyes to what Marxism really is, but more importantly, show them a much better system that we could organize the world around. So you can go to uncommunist.com, and we are launching a Kickstarter campaign next week. And then we'll have printed copies at Bitcoin, at the Bitcoin conference. Both Alex and I are both speaking there, and we'll be doing book signings there as well.
Oh, I'm so excited to read it. I'm so excited. I think it's going to be great. Where can people find out more about you, follow you? I know you've obviously, you're on iHeart Radio as well.
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel, Mark Moss, and I do like 2 teaching videos a week where I dive into these types of topics. I have the radio show on iHeart Radio. You can just search that, Mark Moss Radio. And then yeah, on Twitter, I think we're streaming live to Twitter. So I'm way too active on Twitter. I should probably pull off a little bit. One Mark Moss on Twitter. Like I said, I'm too active. So if you hit me up with questions, I'll certainly answer them there. And then of course, go to check out uncommunist.com.
Mark, it's been so fascinating. I want to thank you so much for going into so much detail. I've personally learned a lot. I've been reading the comments. People have found a lot of value in what you had to say. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to get your book. And yeah, we'll have to catch up again sometime. I'm going to be in Miami as well. So hopefully we can meet in person then.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure being here.
Absolutely. And guys, don't forget to follow Mark on Twitter and definitely check out his book. And until next time, I will see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in.